G'day guys, my name's Ben and welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the new iPhone 12 Pro and most importantly the new camera RAW format that you can now enable thanks to the new iOS update on your iPhone. And thankfully I just recently got my iPhone 12. I'm actually just upgrading from an iPhone 7 Plus, which I've had for 4 years. So I'm really looking forward to testing out a lot of the new features of the camera. And obviously, as someone who uses professional cameras, I'm very interested in trying the new native camera app and how it performs on the iPhone. Obviously, it's always been a bit of a fun dream to see how you can use this camera and what kind of needs it can fulfill without needing to bring your professional camera with you around. So what I'm actually going to do today is a really quick little video. I thought I would just kind of throw the iPhone 12 under the bus and do a little quick camera test just in my front yard just to see how it goes with light painting cars. And what that means is I'm going to be doing a long exposure on my iPhone. I'm going to test how that night mode works on the iPhone 12. It's the first time I'm using that because the iPhone 7 doesn't have that. And I'm also going to be looking at the new ProRAW format to see what dynamic range we can actually get out of this new RAW format from your iPhone. If this all goes well, it could be a game changer. Let's have a look and find out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount my iPhone 12 on top of my Sony a7 III, and I'm going to try and take the same photo on both my Sony as well as the iPhone 12 so we can compare those results and the differences between cameras. Obviously this is a pretty unfair comparison. We know the Sony's going to win, but what's important here is to see how far the iPhone has come, and obviously too how easy it is to do the same kind of work on an iPhone using the native camera app. So why don't we get started? We've got to wait till nighttime for this. So I'm just going to bring my car out, pop it in the front yard and get ready to take this shot. So first thing we need to do is wait for the sun to set. And now that the sun's set, now we're ready to start taking some shots. So as you can see here, the Sony's pretty much ready to go. It's dark enough for us to start light painting. But as you can see on the iPhone, I'm having a lot of trouble trying to get that shutter speed down. I didn't realize this, but it looks like the night mode is very automated. I'm not sure how it's doing it, but it's only letting me go to a very short shutter speed compared to what I need. So I'm really looking for like a 15, 20 or 30 second shutter speed for what I want to do, but it just seems like it's not letting me go that far. Now I found a bit of a hack to get the shutter speed slower a lot quicker, and that's by covering the camera with my hand and letting the software figure out that it's a lot darker now. So I've taken a few shots like that, but the problem that I think the camera's done is because of that, it's sent this ISO setting way too high. And then if I have light painted with those photos that I've done the hack on, the result has been way too overblown. So the light source has overexposed the photo completely and made it completely unusable. And just to show you, have a look at the Sony a7R photo compared to the iPhone. As you can see, the Sony's done perfectly and the iPhone not very good. About an hour later now, and I've waited for the sun to get well and truly down. So now it's very dark. The iPhone is now reporting a good 20 to 30 second shutter speed. So now we're really ready to kind of have a go at taking some proper shots and seeing what happens. So what I've done here too is I've put a timer on my iPhone as well, because obviously I'm tapping the screen when I take the shot and I want to reduce the amount of movement in the camera when it's taking this shot. So I've got the timer on, got the Sony ready to go. We're all ready, let's start taking some shots. So the aim of the game here is to keep a slow shutter speed on the cameras, so I'll be aiming for 30 seconds definitely on the Sony, and I'll be doing my best with the iPhone. For the other settings, the Sony, I will keep at a low ISO, probably between 100 and 400, and I will be sticking with f8 as the aperture. For the iPhone, it's all automated, so I have absolutely no idea what is going to happen. I will also only be planning to turn my light source on while the photo is being taken, not beforehand, and I'm doing that hopefully so the actual camera will keep consistent settings on the iPhone and hopefully everything will be a little bit more consistent. That's what I'm hoping for, fingers crossed. Alright, so I've taken all our shots now, let's jump in and have a look on Lightroom. Right, we're in Lightroom now, and I just kind of wanted to quickly burn through a series of photos that I took just to kind of talk about how this experience went. Now with the iPhone, it was obviously very interesting to experience shooting light painting and a long exposure on it, and there is certainly a learning curve and a lot of software problems that make this a lot more difficult than it needs to be. But I thought I'd first kick off and just show you one of the original photos that I took. And this is completely natural light, and yeah, at ISO 320 we're kind of getting a pretty good look at what our image quality is off the iPhone 12, which is pretty good, and we actually get quite a lot of flexibility in that image. Like, that is pretty bloody good if I have to say so myself, and obviously that flexibility is really, really good for a phone photo, and I'm really glad to finally have that in the native camera app. So now that we've looked at our natural light photo, the two problems that I had while shooting on the iPhone was that I could not manually set that shutter speed at all. I had to actually wait for it to get pitch black outside before the phone would let me get to that 30-second exposure. And additionally too, I could not adjust or set that ISO setting to be anything consistent. And in fact, with all these photos I took, they all were like the phone had a mind of its own in picking the ISO. For each photo, it would range between ISO 320 all the way up to 5000, and that meant for some very inconsistent shots. And really, I was at the mercy of what the iPhone thought the setting should be, even though there was a realm of manual setting involved. So, having a look at a few of these, the phone just completely overexposed at a high ISO, which was really, really disappointing. Even moving on to, once I started to kind of get the hang of the settings that we needed, while this photo actually looks pretty good from far away, up close, the iPhone has a really terrible job at representing highlights. They're all pixelated, distorted, and really, really blown out to the point where it stands out. It looks like I've kind of colored the car in with a texture or pencil. Yeah, not really very good at all, if I have to say so myself. But that said, being able to do this on an iPhone is pretty cool, and I'm pretty impressed, to say the least. So for every one of these shots that I took, I made sure the shutter was on before I turned my light source on. So there should not be any variance in these settings. The camera should be reasonably consistent, but it seems like the camera seems to make its mind up while you're taking the shot, because it's the only way I can explain how the ISO is changing so much. We are literally going from ISO 3200 to 1000 to 8000, back to 2000. Even got an ISO 5000 photo here, and have a look at this shot. It has really blown out and done some weird blue anomaly in the corner of the frame here. Don't know what's happened. So one of the other things I started to notice when I started to get some consistent light painting streaks in my shots too, was that for some reason these light streaks started to get gaps in them. Can you see the streak is broken? I don't understand how that's happened, and certainly does not happen in the Sony photos on the mirrorless camera, and I would expect it would be exactly the same on a DSLR as well. It makes me really think there is some weird magic happening here with these photos to get them at a long exposure. So does the camera stop in between these breaks for a split second or something like that? I get the feeling that's the case. Even looking over at our shutter speed that the camera's recorded here, the iPhone, or the metadata here, is saying that this photo was taken at half a second, but actually this was like a 15-20 second pass. So I'm actually getting a discrepancy between what actually happened in real life and what the metadata is reporting. So I actually think this is a series of photos stitched together. Now, after a while, I found most of my photos became successful. As you'll see down here, there is not as many overexposed shots, by really turning the brightness down on my light source. And that actually meant that most of the photos I took on my Sony no longer turned out very good, but on the iPhone, they turned out all right. So once again, here's one of my light passes to get highlights. Once again, there's still those breaks in the shot, and you'll see the highlight edges are once again really, really bad. And it's not just the streaks, like the car, the highlights here are not good at all. Even like that little one on the spoiler, not so good. Now this shot too, basically highlight free, but even zooming in on that, like the highlight is just broken, I would call it. Even so, by merging a few of these photos together, we've probably, with a bit of editing, got something that we can work on. Now on the Sony, we can see that the photos turned out pretty good almost immediately, and obviously these photos have so much flexibility in them, it's not funny. So obviously we can increase the shadows tenfold and go absolutely nuts with these shots. So there is plenty of flexibility here for us to pull out a, 3 or 4 photos and merge them all together and get something pretty usable. Even at some of the shots that I took on the Sony, like this shot was just to highlight the window frame here, and on the iPhone that just got completely blown out. Now with my light source, I took this photo at a brightness that was good for the Sony, and after this point I turned the brightness down so I could start getting better shots on the iPhone, but on the Sony they really did not turn out very well at all. And that was mostly, I would imagine, because we had the ISO much higher on the iPhone and we could not control that again. Now in reality, if we were doing this properly, we would have only taken a handful of shots for this, but definitely we've got enough to make it work. So what I'm going to do now is edit the Sony photo and the iPhone photo and see how they compare edited. Alright, so here's the edited photos from both the Sony and the iPhone, and overall they kind of came together pretty well. I think you'll agree the iPhone did pretty well considering what we went through. Basically what we've done is we've taken a handful of photos from each of the different cameras and kind of layered them on in Photoshop. And what we've basically done is we've taken a layer for the background, we've taken a layer for some highlights, we've kind of tried to get some highlights on the front of the car as well. And we've taken a photo of the wheels and things like that. Basically just tried to light a few different individual parts of the car just to bring it all out. So just having a look through the layers here, as you can see, each of these layers are basically the same shot that I took on the iPhone and the Sony. So here is like the finished product, very similar layer masks on each, very similar result. And what do you think? Obviously you get a lot more depth in the image, a lot less grain, and you can zoom in a hell of a lot more on the Sony, but overall, especially on a phone device, the result is very, very similar. So for me, this test was to see if the iPhone 12 could basically shoot and produce a similar type of image using the same workflow that I would use on a mirrorless or DSLR camera. And while I have managed to put together a final image here, as you can see, the main problem I had with this style of shoot, particularly with how I was trying to put highlights on the vehicle, really the iPhone 12 has not done very well with highlights at all. You can see the jagged edges are still very, very well present, and if I was going to tidy those up in Photoshop, there is a lot more time that I would need to dedicate to fixing up this image. And to be honest, and considering I shot this in the front of my house and the car was dirty, I'm not willing to put that amount of effort in. But what I will say is if I was going to tackle this again, considering how sensitive the iPhone 12 is to light and also how inconsistent those ISO settings were, I would be trying to do something to trick the iPhone into bringing its ISO settings down, perhaps by introducing a modeling light or some continual light source, anything that gives the iPhone the ability to read there's a bit more light in the scene. The challenge here is the iPhone just simply didn't have enough light to read, as this scene was very, very dark. And that often meant I believe the iPhone just defaulted to picking that high ISO. I think if we did run this with a little bit more of a constant light source and got that ISO setting down, we might have even seen better results on those highlight streaks on the photos as well. The problem with a vehicle is you need to allocate time to walk around it, and what that means is we still need to make sure whatever we do from a lighting perspective, we need to have enough time to get that light source around the car, and that generally means we need a 10 to 30 second shutter speed, particularly if you're on your own. So for my first shoot with the iPhone, here are some lessons and ideas that I would apply for the next shoot. Your iPhone is not a DSLR camera, and likely there's a better way to shoot on your phone than mimicking the same process you would use from a professional camera, particularly with the native iPhone camera app. Light painting a large car requires time. You need some time to get around the vehicle, and the area can't be too bright where you can't have a slow shutter speed. Getting a low ISO was the hardest thing with the iPhone, and I think you'll need to trick the iPhone into keeping that ISO down. Perhaps by trialing a modeling light, shooting in a brighter scene, or even having a friend help you would go a long way in helping, I reckon. If the ISO is still high when you're shooting, perhaps having a weaker light source might go a long way in keeping those highlights in control. Or we could invest in a third-party app with full manual controls, and that might make all these problems a thing of the past. And considering this is my first time giving this type of shoot a crack on my iPhone, leave a comment below if you think you might have a better idea on how we could improve the process. So I guess to answer the question of this video, can you do light painting of a car on your iPhone 12 Pro? The answer is well and truly yes. Is it a frustrating and inconsistent experience? The answer is also yes. But it really is nice to know, at least for a bit of fun, you can start to get some interesting results from your iPhone. So there you go, guys. We've proven that you can light paint a car with the iPhone 12 Pro and the new ProRAW format. And obviously that extra flexibility from those file formats actually ended up producing a pretty good quality photo once you ran it through Photoshop and everything. So I really do recommend, especially if you don't own a camera yet, probably playing with this app and maybe investing in one of those aftermarket third-party apps that have a lot more manual controls is probably a great way to get started in photography and at least learn some of those creative tricks and things like that. But otherwise, I think I'll probably be staying with my Sony a7R for the time being for most of my photography work, as I'm sure you'd expect. So overall, I think it's very exciting that we can now get to this level of creativity with the iPhone camera. It's obviously pretty exciting to see what you can do with it. There's still quite a lot of quirks and weird things about it that obviously need to be resolved if you wanted that pure manual control to get those shots that you need. But for the people that are looking to experiment, this is probably a really great way to start. So anyway, guys, this was a bit of a fun one, so I hope you found some value in it. And if you did find it interesting, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And otherwise, we'll see you around for the next video. Have a good one. See you later.